Who's up there?
Cougar and Merlin and Maverick and Goose.
Great. Maverick and Goose.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Today we're going to be talking about the Beloit Sky Carp, a high A affiliate of the Miami Marlins who play in Beloit, Wisconsin. Later on in this episode, I will be speaking with Jason Klein of the design firm Brandiose. I will be speaking with Howard April of the Ware Nature Center in Milwaukee. And, of course, Dan Simon of Studio Simon will be here with one of his Studio Simon stumpers. Right now, I am so pleased to be speaking with Quint Studer, who is the team owner for the Beloit Sky Carp. Quint, good morning. How are you?
Thanks, Paul. I'm fine. Thanks for having me on today.
I am so thrilled to be talking to you about this team. This is a relatively recent arrival on the minor league baseball landscape, even though the Beloit has had a team for some time. The Sky Carp have been around for just a couple of years. You and I spoke back in 2021 when this team name was launched and was unveiled. Of course, the Beloit Snappers were your predecessor. There's a lot to talk about here. This is a really fascinating brand. There's a great story behind it. I wanted to start with the fact that you told me back in 2021 that if you had bet on Beloit still having a team after minor league baseball reorganized down from 160 to 120 teams, that you would have won a lot of money betting on that because it was against the odds. Can you tell me about the fact that Beloit still has a team and the role you all played in that?
Yeah, I will, Paul. And I'm shocked they still have a team at times, because if you look at the hurdles they had to come, it's how do you fund a stadium privately? And that's really the question. You know, so many stadiums are funded with public monies or private money, but there's enough land around it that the person can develop that to make the money to do that. This was a very unique situation. Again, the Snappers were one of those early teams years ago. They were actually Beloit Brewers. I was living in Janesville when the question was, does Janesville get a team or does Beloit? And Janesville was a bigger city, made a little more sense for Janesville, but Janesville wouldn't allow beer sales where the stadium was going to go. And they said, baseball, no beer sales. So it ended up with a bunch of wonderful guys, really, or ladies, who formed a not-for-profit entity to sort of have this fun little thing called minor league baseball. And that's what it was like 30 years ago. It wasn't unusual. And then, of course, with all the changes, even before Major League Baseball got more involved in facility, minor league baseball was telling Beloit, if you don't fix the stadium, we're going to have to pull the team. This was even before the 160 to 120. This was just with the 160. And I got a call from Pat O'Connor. He said, I know you're from Pensacola. I know you got roots in Wisconsin. Is there any way you would possibly buy that team? I made a quick effort, and they said, no, we don't think so. We still like what we're doing. And then it got so obvious that they couldn't do it. So I said, I'll buy the team, but with the condition that if the stadium doesn't happen, then I'm not going to fall through with the sale, because I'm really buying nothing. And so that's how it sort of happened. And then it's a small market. I went to a meeting with a group of people. I presented why I thought minor league baseball was never going to be a big, Dayton or anything like that. But I sort of made it as an anchor to your downtown, because they've done some really great things in the northern part of their downtown. But if we can make it in the south, it'd be an anchor. So I met with Diane Hendricks, who's the really philanthropic giant in not only Beloit, but many places. She's a wonderful lady. And she's started a roofing company called ABC Supply that's become very successful. She's done great work. And I rolled out why this made sense. But Diane wasn't a baseball person. She doesn't focus on baseball. She focuses on construction, roofing, and schools and other philanthropy type things. So when we left, I said to my wife, we're going to get credit for trying, but we're not going to lose any money, because this is never going to happen. And about 2 weeks later, Diane's people called me and said, Diane will help build the stadium.
Wow.
So she put in about 20 million of the 35 million. Then her construction company put in another 5 million. I put in 5, and then Dennis Connerton, one of the old original owners of the Snappers, came through at 5. So it was pretty much a privately funded stadium, which is, again, very unusual. And because Diane's construction, she owns a construction company too. It's all brick. I mean, it's truly an amazing stadium. If you go look at it, it's small, it's on the river, it's not overbuilt, and it's really built well because she owns a construction company.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. What a success story for Beloit. I appreciate you starting us off with that. But obviously, this is a podcast about logos and nicknames and what they mean to their local communities. There is so much going on here. We have a Canada Goose. There's a wrench. There's a scarf. There's some goggles. There's all sorts of stories to be told. Let's start with the Canada Goose itself. What is a sky carp?
I didn't know it either. And I like Snappers, but the challenge was it just was a wore out name that wasn't working anymore. Maybe if it was a Sky Carp, we would have changed it to Snappers. Who knows? But I was at a focus group. I only went to one focus group, and we were in focus groups, and we didn't. We had a company run focus group, and we're sitting around, and somebody said, "What about the Sky Carp?" And I'm thinking, well, there are carp in the Rock River. I know that, a lot of carp in the Rock River, but I didn't know they jumped, like flying fish.
Right.
And he said, no, it's a goose that doesn't migrate. Now, if you read a lot of my work, I wrote a book called Building Vibrant Communities. I talk about the fact that every small mid-market community's goal is to keep their talent home and get their talent back. So I love the hook. I just was all over this right from the beginning, that this is a goose that chooses not to migrate, but they stay home. And that's really what we're trying to send the message is, this is a type of community that's so cool that even people that normally leave don't leave, particularly the young people and the talent. So that's what really grabbed me right off the bat, the meaning of the goose that doesn't leave.
Well, and so I have to say that we have a fair number of geese here in Colorado. They are, you hear the phrase silly goose and you think, oh, like they're kind of this funny, cutesy little animal. They're no joke. You don't want to mess with a goose. You come down a running trail and there's a gaggle of them there. Even the word gaggle is sort of silly, right? But they will hiss at you, and if they think you're threatening their little ones or just their space, they will come at you. They are not to be trifled with.
Well, even before I got into the Sky Carp, I do presentations on teamwork and things like that. I used to show geese in a formation and talk about what great team players they are. So when geese fly, they fly in a very specific formation for the wind. So you can get, buy another goose so you don't get the wind, sort of deflects it. Number 2 is if a goose gets tired, they then rotate. So the head goose isn't always the head goose. They rotate. So when you're really thinking of what you want to make in a community, it's a place that people have different roles. They're not afraid to rotate to where it's needed at that time. So even the goose, as far as being a team player, I thought was really neat when you get into what a goose represents.
Yeah, for sure. There are some other details in this brand, which was created by Brandios, and some of the other details, we'll just take them one at a time, if you don't mind. I think that the simplest one might be the scarf. This goose is wearing a scarf. Can you tell me how come he's wearing a scarf?
Well, I think it's the winter. I
Mhm.
think we wanted to have the orange scarf because I think when you look at Wisconsin, it's a very outdoorsy type place. So I think we just thought the orange and the scarf really tied into the fact that it's this all season type community.
Absolutely. If this goose were migrating to wherever geese end up when they migrate, somewhere south and somewhere warmer than Wisconsin in the winter, I'm sure he wouldn't need this scarf. But yeah, the scarf is keeping him warm because he's sticking around in Wisconsin during all the seasons.
And hunting is so big. And, if you look at hunting, it's an orange color. So we
Mm.
want to sort of, again, talk about, it's a very outdoorsy type community. And people in the winter particularly wear orange, so they're identifiable.
Right. Okay. And so this goose might be safe from the hunters then because he's wearing that flagship orange that you're talking about for sure. He's carrying a wrench, which looks heavy, but geese are strong and big, right? Like I mean, they're not small birds. He is carrying a wrench. Why is he carrying a wrench?
Well, Beloit's history is very much what I would call industrial. and especially, like any industrial type community during wars, they're very important. So there's a company called Fairbanks Morse in Beloit, Wisconsin. In fact, there's just a ship that just got a Christian or whatever they call it when they hit the bottle on it this year called the USS Beloit. So Beloit's always had a history of ships building diesel engines for ships. So Fairbanks Morse, that wrench sort of signifies the strong ironworks history. And really that's what it is. Beloit was built on ironworks. Ironwork companies. In fact, one of the nice hotels downtown is called the Ironworks. So if you go downtown, you'll see a lot of replicas of iron machines because it was really built on ironworks. So, and Fairbanks Morse played such a big role, and that's where the wrench stands for. And actually sort of the part that Beloit played in World War II.
Okay. And then finally, there's a mark with the goose now has his head underwater and he's wearing goggles. But the origin of those goggles is not water goggles. It is something else. Why is our goose wearing? Does the goose have a name?
Yes, I'll get to that right after this question.
Okay, I'm sorry. So why is this? Well, name TBD goose. Why is he wearing or she? Why is it wearing goggles?
The first female aviator that flew cross-continental across the United States is from Beloit. So this was a sort of showing our respect for women. Beloit's got a lot of strong women leadership. We wanted to recognize women. We wanted to recognize Beloit's aviation history. And the fact it's pretty cool, the first female to fly across the United States was from Beloit. So those really represent her.
Absolutely. Okay, you've kept us waiting. What is our goose's name here?
Poopsie. And what happened with that, for those that don't know what the name Poopsie means, it came about in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, is where it first came about, and it's a terms of endearment, my little Poopsie. So that's where the name came. And of course, then to have a little more fun on it, Poopsie wears the number 2.
Of course.
Pretty interesting because it takes a while for people to connect that, or they don't at all. But we thought we'd have a little fun with it. So, and what kid, we're very big in the reading program in Beloit. I mean, what kid doesn't want to yell Poopsie when the mascot comes into their room for reading?
Absolutely, 100%. And certainly evocative of some other evidence of geese that I encounter when I'm running out there in the morning, for sure.
What's neat, Paul? Here in Pensacola, we're very lucky that every Sunday the Blue Angels are making an air show somewhere in the United States. So every Sunday at 6:00, we start the games at a little after 4. The Blue Angels, on their way back to Pensacola, because this is where they're based, fly over the stadium. So people get to see the Blue Angels fly. And what's pretty cool about Beloit is probably every 4 or 5 games, you get a formation of geese that fly over the stadium and everybody cheers like crazy. It reminds me of the Blue Angels. They don't have the Blue Angels, but they have their geese formation that flies over the stadium. So it's been a lot of fun.
The Poopsie geese formation, I guess, is we should point out, by the way, that you've mentioned Pensacola a few times. The ownership group that you're involved with also owns the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. And so that's how come you're in Pensacola right now as we're having this conversation. But there's also that strong connection to Beloit. I know that when you made the switch from the Snappers name to the Sky Carp name, you see it every single time a minor league baseball team rebrands. There's obviously nostalgia for a team, especially if it's been around for a certain amount of time. The Snappers had been around for, like you said, about 30 years at that point. And so to change that brand obviously you're going to be fighting that battle against people who have that connection to the old team. But you still have incorporated Snappy, and then you played, with throwback Snappers uniforms in select games. So there's still a connection to that old brand. Can you tell me about, the significance of that and why it's important to you to maintain that connection to the Snappers brand?
Probably less important every year. We have found that people have grabbed the Sky Carp so much that And remember, Beloit only had 7 season ticket holders. So when people would say to me, all the season ticket holders are upset with the name change, I'd say, which one of the 7?
Mm.
And now they did, like anything, they like 1,000 people saying we want to keep the name. And I said, well, I'll keep it if you buy season tickets. And that just didn't happen. So you always want to show respect for those that didn't get their way. And so that was it, is just showing respect. And then you see how it goes. And for example, again, I'm talking about Pensacola again, the team that came in second for the Wahoos was Mullet. Now, some people told me, if you name this team the Mullets, it's going to be the laughing stock of the world because it's a bottom feeding fish. Well, we come out with mullet uniforms and they sell like crazy. So you just don't know. So you sort of test the market every year on, is there still an appetite for the snappers? Is there still gonna, because one of the goals here is to sell merchandise. And that's really what you're looking at. Because with a small market like Beloit, you got a small market, so the smallest market, second smallest market in affiliated baseball. You're not going to make all your money on during the turnstile. You've got to come up with other revenue streams, and merchandise, as we know, is an important revenue stream that can go outside your particular market.
Well, and you're, Pensacola, you're talking about the Mullets was a runner-up in the Name the Team contest. You had some names that drew some attention during the Name the Team contest for the Sky Carp. The other possibilities were the Cheese Balls, the Polka Pike, the Supper Clubbers, and the Moo. Which of those, when you look back on that, is there one where you look back and you say, oh, that one could have also really worked, or was there a runner-up, or is there one that might be that might show up on a what might have been night like the Pensacola does with the Mullets?
Not as much as the mullet. I think when you look at Beloit, we wanted to be unique and we wanted the name to connect with something. So people say, what we wanted people to say, what's a sky carp? And I thought the polka pike I like a lot. And I like this. Who doesn't like a relish tray? I love the supper clubbers. But I think when we came down to it, it's just the sky carp really symbolized what we were trying to, what a lot of people way before me and way more than me in Beloit have been trying to do, which is continue to take a town. Anytime you have a town that was built on manufacturing and industry, they're going to go through some tough transitions. And Beloit's done a great job. We're just a small little piece of this. They've done a great job with their downtown and way more investors than me. So I really like this, what the Sky Carp resembled, which is, hey, we want people to say, what's a Sky Carp? And then we can explain it. And once we explain that it's a goose that doesn't migrate, because our whole goal is to create the type of community that no one wants to leave, right away people go, that is cool. That is neat. So I think that was by far the one that I like. Though you're always looking at like supper clubbers and the polka pike. The Moo, I can't tell you how many teams say they own that name, the Moo. I'm not sure they do. But this is also something that, you're aware of, Paul. You have to really protect these trademarks because today there's loss. You might name it something and you're going to get something from an attorney telling you that somebody else owns that name.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I can imagine, and there's a finite number of names out there, and I think that's where, with the work that Brandiose does in particular in naming teams for unusual terms for animals like the sod poodles, like the sea unicorns, that sort of thing. That is something that you see and probably helps with that because there's, you can only have so many tigers and bears and wildcats in the world, I guess.
Oh, we got that. But Brandiose does a great job. I remember I got a really emotional note from someone. He had to talk to me right away in Beloit because of the controversy, the controversy over this name. And he said, it's a natural. We have eagles here. You got to name them the Eagles. And I said, that name's already taken. But, and with all people with good intentions, because, and then, read my books or my articles, I think sometimes we overreact to a generality, everybody, all the people, so on. But Diane Hendricks, to her credit, she got, I don't live in Beloit. So she's the one that was getting banged on at places. You can't name them the Sky Carp. People don't like goose. They poop all over the place, blah, blah, blah. And Diane stuck with us. So I really give Diane a lot of credit for trusting us when we did the name change. And I remember speaking at Beloit College a year ago at a conference, and the head of merchandise was there. And there was quite a few people there. And I said, hey, last year the Snappers, how much merchandise did we sell? And he said, like $33,000. And I said, well, our first year of the Sky Carp, what did we do? And he said, $400,000.
Hmm.
Now, that's not what some teams do, but in our market, 400,000 is a lot better than 33,000. And, and so that, and you could see sometimes people, they have to see it. There's people that can see it before it happens, but the great majority of people, Paul, don't really understand it until they see it. Then once they see it, even in Beloit, they kept saying, we just don't understand a stadium because they're comparing it to what they had, which wasn't a great stadium. Then they come down and they see this beautiful brick stadium on the river and they go, oh, this isn't what we were expecting. So I think sometimes you have to drive to the finish line before some people really realize what the race was all about.
Well, and I think in minor league baseball with these rebrands, especially the more sort of out there they are, the longer they take for folks to come around. But they do come around. And, at the time of this recording right now, there were 2 unveilings yesterday in minor league baseball. And, there's always a reaction, right? Like there's always a knee-jerk reaction, but it's really the staying power that matters. It was April 12, 2022 that the Sky Carp made their debut. I can't believe it's only been 2 seasons. It feels like the Sky Carp have been around a lot longer than that. But 2 years in now, playing 2 seasons with this new nickname, how has that reaction changed since the first unveil when we wrote this article in November of 2021?
Last year, I had not one person come up to me and talk about the snappers or talk about, or people used to give me keychains with little snapper turtles on it when it was controversial, and we had a couple guys, again, good intentions, running a website. So I think it's been really well understood. I think people sort of get a kick out of it and the whole bit. So I think it did exactly what we wanted to do. It wasn't about baseball. It was sending a message that this is a type of community that's so cool that even things that normally migrate are deciding to stay. So I think that from the beginning was not as much about naming a team of sort of framing what you're trying to do for the community.
Absolutely. Well, Quint, thank you for coming on and chatting with me about the Sky Carp. So many fun details, so many fun stories to tell, and I appreciate you having them at the ready for me there. Where can people find the Sky Carp online and on social media?
Yeah, I think if they just go to Beloit Sky Carp, they'll find it. And they can even get a rendition of Poopsie, which is quite popular with children, a little stuffed animal called, what kid doesn't want to have a reason to say the word Poopsie without getting in trouble?
I mean, I'm 50 years old and I'm enjoying saying Poopsie right now. So it's so I appreciate it. Quint, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm so pleased to welcome back to the podcast my friend Jason Klein of Brandiose, the prolific design firm. Jason, how are we doing?
I'm fantastic. This is going to be a fun one. I can't wait to jump in.
Oh man, the Beloit Sky Carp have a lot going on. This is a story of a team that looked like it might not make the cut when minor league baseball reorganized, and they went from playing at a park that was cute and nice, but not up to minor league baseball standards, with a brand that was also cute and nice, but needed to be refreshed. And now they've got this beautiful new ballpark and this high-end Brandiose brand that tells a ton of different stories. I don't even know where to start. Jason, what's a Sky Carp?
That's great question. So, one of the things when we start a project, we do our research visits, and we feel like it's really a disservice to develop a brand for a community we haven't spent time in, especially a 365 brand like the Sky Carp. And one of the things, Beloit is going through a renaissance, a sort of a revival, if you will. As a community, it was a manufacturing community. There's a lot of marine, manufacturing, industrial heritage that happened in the community. And over the years, people would grow up and kind of say like, well, yeah, maybe I'm going to move to Milwaukee or Green Bay, or, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to move to Chicago. And we're really seeing a return to investment in Beloit, making Beloit cool again. And it's a great community. There's a lot to offer, a lot of cool people. And it's kind of that big city feel, but in a small community. And so they were like, yeah, like let's obviously they're building a new downtown ballpark. And so it was really an opportunity to say, how do we celebrate this renaissance, this sort of revitalization, people coming back? And so we were, thinking about team names and talking about, local animals. And obviously they had the world famous Beloit snappers, and the ballpark, and it's beloved, and, little league teams across America. But it was really time to signal this renaissance, this rebirth, people staying in Beloit rather than moving away, and really looking forward to coming back. And so as we're looking around, everybody's talking about these Canadian geese, and, there's a lot of Canadian geese in the community. And I was like, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's a sky carp. And I was like, well, what is, what's the thing about sky carp, right? And they're like, oh, it's slang for a Canadian goose who comes down to Beloit, or comes down anywhere and doesn't leave, right? It's like it just wants to stay here. And I'm like, are you serious? That's like the thing. Yeah. Like they just love it here so much they never want to go back. And I was like, what a great metaphor for what we're trying to do in Beloit is to celebrate this renaissance. And so, we knew it was going to be a Canadian goose. At that point, there hadn't been like a lot of popular Canadian goose mascots in sports. So we had, developed this goose, it's got a scarf on it, this sort of flying south in the winter concept. It's got a wrench to represent the manufacturing heritage. And we put it in Marlins uniforms because, Marlins colors because, we're a Marlins affiliate. And it came together in a real fun way.
There's, I said there's a lot going on here, and we've already spoken with Quint Studer on this episode, so we've gotten into some of these stories here. I'm curious from your perspective as a designer, like how much of a challenge it is to tell multiple stories in one logo, right? Because one of the things about logos or brand identities is they have to be simple, and so telling these multiple stories in one brand has to be a challenge for you to fit them seamlessly together.
Yeah, I think one of the ideas when we started off, we thought, okay, it's a Canadian goose, and it's going to say Sky Carp across the jersey. And so Canadian geese are black and white. There is some brown in there, or it could be gray, depending on how you look at it. So really, early on, we're like, okay, it's going to be black and white. And if you take away white, you kind of got black and you got gray. And that's where we started from. And then you throw in the Marlins colors, and it became kind of a musical chairs of, where the color goes, black and gray. And then you have your Marlins colors. And, there was this idea that it was, Canadian geese fly south, for the winter. So, we kind of played around different ways to do we want to have like a helmet on it? Do we want to have, is it goggles? What is it? So the scarf made sense because the scarf communicated both flying and also, this idea of flying south for the winter. And then, the manufacturing heritage. And that was really sort of the basis of it. Like, all right, so it's going to have a, wrench is sort of a symbol of its manufacturing heritage, this idea to fly south. There's some alternate logos that came about, whether it was the head underwater, the goose carrying the wrench in its mouth. But for the most part, that was sort of the basic. And then it was, the lettering was, could we make the lettering look like Canadian goose, so that it would communicate what a sky carp was if you didn't see the logo, right? If you just saw the lettering on a jersey, like, what's a sky carp? Oh, that looks like a Canadian goose. Okay, so it must be a Canadian goose. And then the font, we did a very industrial style block font. It's on the roundel. It's used on all the team font elements to celebrate the industrial heritage.
Well, it's very much part of the sort of rebirth of this team, right? Like, because it did, for all the world in 2020 looked like this team was on the chopping block, and then this brand was unveiled in 2022, and that was all part of this rebirth. it's been fun to see the response to this, in the 2 years since then, right? Because it's just like even it's like the arrow and the FedEx logo, right? Like people pick up these details. They're like, oh, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was part of this, and so definitely a fun brand that tells a lot of stories about a place. And as we have done on this episode, we've gotten into those stories. So certainly appreciate your perspective on that design process as always. Jason, thank you again. Appreciate you coming by and talking about the work that you do. And everyone can find Brandiose on the socials at Brandiose and brandiose.com. Jason, we'll talk to you again soon.
Can't wait.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I am so pleased to be welcoming back to the podcast my very good friend, Howard April. You may remember Howard's appearance on the Beloit Snappers episode of Baseball by Design about a year ago, maybe more than a year ago at this point. So it's been a little bit since we've had Howard on. Howard is a park naturalist with Weir Nature Center in Milwaukee County Parks. Howard April, hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello, Paul Caputo. I'm doing very well.
We have been to several Beloit Snappers games before, as has been well documented on, like I said, the Snappers episode of this podcast. We got to dress as mattresses. We raced each other on the field. We got our picture taken with Snappy, the snapping turtle. And you and I got to talk about snapping turtles in that episode on the Snappers. You have the advantage on me. You have been to ABC Supply Ballpark Stadium. If you would you paint a word picture for us? What was it like for you as a not too far away resident of the area to go to this beautiful new ballpark where the Sky Carp play?
It is a fabulous venue. In fact, I'm very pleased to say myself, my wife, some friends, we were actually there for opening night of the newly launched venue for what was the last season of the Beloit Snappers, and it was amazing to be there for the very first pitch of a brand new venue.
I forgot that's how that went. They played as the Snappers for 1 year in ABC Supply Stadium, and then they switched over to the Sky Carp. I'm going to ask you, and we've been talking about it already on this episode, as a naturalist, your take on the notion of Sky Carp. Was that a term you had heard prior to this team coming into existence? Is the notion of a Sky Carp being a Canada goose that does not migrate, is that, from a naturalist standpoint, is that valid? Is that real?
Okay, Paul, this might not go over well. However, first of all, I love baseball. Don't even get me started about the designated hitter. But be that as it may, Sky Carp, it's a very clever term. I think it's a very neat rebrand. As a naturalist, I have to admit, the term Sky Carp, when referring to Canada geese, it could be, to the purists, it could be considered a bit of a pejorative, and it does kind of label Canada geese in an unfavorable light, when in reality they are amazing creatures with so many amazing adaptations that actually have many characteristics and traits that as humans, we could learn from and actually emulate.
Very interesting. My experience with Canada geese is that they populate the trail that I run on with my buddy Chris. And if we get too close, especially when they have little ones, they hiss at me. So that's so I am not well familiar with the wonderful attributes of a Canada goose. Before I ask you though, that had you actually heard the term? Was that has that term, is that thrown around in Wisconsin as a pejorative for Canada geese?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And let me back up a little bit. One of the things I do as a naturalist in my role at Weir Nature Center is I interact with the public. I field a lot of phone calls from the public who have concerns, questions, interest in learning more about wildlife, because we live in an area where there's a lot of interface between wildlife and people. And when you have a lot of people and wildlife coming into contact, that creates potential for conflict.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I've done at Ware Nature Center, and actually it's one of the great honors to be able to do, is to help people understand the role that wildlife play in our lives and to learn more harmoniously with them. That's a long way of saying that I have heard the term, not just the term sky carp, but multiple other pejoratives for other creatures.
What are some of your
over
favorites?
the
Let's hear them.
years.
What are your top 5 favorite pejorative terms for animals?
Oh my gosh, I've heard the term trash panda
Of course,
when
home.
referring to raccoons,
Mhm.
which is interesting that there's actual major league team or minor league teams that have actually picked up on that.
In the second most famous Madison in America, Madison, Alabama, after Madison, Wisconsin, of course.
Well, of course. And of course, rats with wings. And I've heard that term used with both starlings and with pigeons / rock doves.
Okay.
But really, what that really reflects is in many ways just a lack of understanding of why wildlife do what they do.
Mhm.
And Canada geese are one of those. And then there are some other terms that people have used over the years that, quite frankly and seriously, I cannot share on a family branded podcast.
Go ahead and say it. I'm going to bleep it. I want to hear it. I'm going to bleep it.
Let me say, I have heard from more than one caller over the years. I've heard people refer to the raccoons. And why are they at my feeder eating my feed?
Oh man, this is going to be like an episode of Arrested Development here with the censor button. It's
Which, people get very animated and about their interaction with wildlife. And
yeah.
I've always tried to take the adage of, meet people where they're at and be non-judgmental, because, one person's just like, okay, we need to understand things a little bit better, as another person's crisis. And what I try and do is try and change people's perception from ignorance and fear to awareness and understanding.
Well, we're going to do some of that right here, right now. I apologize for steering you to the negative. You were about to tell me about the really positive attributes of Canada geese, and I can't wait to hear them.
Sure. Well, first of all, people think a goose is a goose is a goose, but in reality, Canada geese, there's actually multiple different subspecies that are scattered throughout North America. It's very appropriate, I think, that there is a Canada goose associated mascot for a team in Wisconsin. And that is because, for instance, in Wisconsin, especially Western Wisconsin, we are along what's called the Mississippi Valley Flyway, which is basically, think of a seasonal superhighway for Canada geese and other migratory species to follow the Mississippi River south in the springtime and north in the fall. And it's estimated over 1 million Canada geese migrate through Wisconsin during the course of any one given year. So it's very appropriate that we have a Canada goose associated team. But not only do they migrate through, but they stop here in Wisconsin. There's a place called Horicon Marsh, which is a wetland of global importance, and it's estimated that anywhere between 100,000 to 200,000 Canada geese stop there on migration to do everything that you and I would do when we drive a long trip. They stop there to rest, they stop there to sleep, they stop there to eat, they stop there to go to the bathroom as they continue on their journey. And that's just one of the many species that stops here in Wisconsin. But what's really amazing about them, one of the things that I find really interesting, is that they are, first of all, when they form a pair bond, they typically mate for life. And that can be a very long life. If once you survive the first year or two, a Canada goose can live 10 to 20 years.
Wow, which feels even longer if you have a mate for life.
my in-laws were married for like 60 plus years, and I'm just amazed that they were married not just 60 years but married 60 years.
Yeah,
to the same person.
exactly. Incredible. Is it true that geese do not relieve themselves in flight, that it only happens when they're on the ground?
You know what? I have to admit, I am not as much up on Canada goose elimination.
Okay. Yeah.
However,
Okay.
you had mentioned that you've encountered them on your on the running path, and
Mhm.
that they have a tendency to hiss
Mhm.
and be kind of antisocial.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget, for all the parents that are out there listening, most parents are pretty darn protective of their
Mhm.
other youngsters, especially when they're really young and can't take care of themselves. And Canada geese are highly protective of the nest and highly protective of their youngsters. And I think that for all the parents that are out there listening, I think that's something that they can easily relate to. I mean, what mom and dad don't care tremendously for their kids and won't go to great lengths to protect them.
So this brand is based on the notion, this narrative, that sky carp are specifically a Canada goose that has decided not to migrate anymore. It sounds like maybe that's not necessarily the case. That's part of the narrative that this team has conjured, which is, fine. It's a nice story. Are there, though, regardless of whether they're called sky carp, are there Canada geese that decide at a certain point, like, they're done with migrating and they're just going to stay in one place in the winter?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And it's not just Canada geese that will take that strategy. And let me explain why. Very briefly, migration is an adaptation that animals have developed and adapted to deal with change in the weather, and not necessarily cold, but the loss of availability of food and water. So by picking up and moving, when there's no when the water freezes or when there's no food, you pick up and you go someplace where there is that availability. Well, what we've done in our urban suburban areas is we have artificially changed conditions. People feed them. We mow lawns so they're really, really short and they go right up to the water. New subdivisions are designed with drainage basins, retention basins that oftentimes have water in them year round. So we are creating conditions that any self-respecting Canada goose would be like, hey, this is really good. Why go through the problems of migration when I can just stick right here in Franklin, Wisconsin, or anywhere else and ride out the winter without having to go through the effort of migrating? So in a weird, ironic way, people have created these conditions that can create these negative interactions with our Canada goose neighbors.
Okay.
So absolutely, positively, there are Canada geese that'll just be like, nope, conditions are just fine. I'm not pulling up stakes. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to ride out the winter just fine.
Let me ask you this. Every time I say Canada goose, I'm a little bit proud of myself for not saying Canadian goose. So far, that's not a question. But the question is, what, from a grammar and usage perspective here, which you and I are both fans of, you
Yes.
famously like to send me pictures of errant apostrophes and that sort of thing. Why are they Canada geese and not Canadian geese?
Oh, good question.
Thank you.
And that is because the governing body on bird names says so. There is a group called the I know, it basically comes down to, because that's the way it is.
Because the umpire called it a
Well,
strike. That's why it was a strike.
there's an organization called the AOU, the American Ornithological Union, and essentially that is the organization that is kind of the final say, or the governing body that says what a bird is going to be called, both the common name and the Latin name.
Okay. So before I let you go here, Howard, what have we not tapped into in terms of the positive attributes of Canada geese? And I'll ask you something that I ask Ranger Amy, your friend Ranger Amy, every time she's on the podcast as our official wildlife correspondent. You're our Wisconsin wildlife correspondent, and I appreciate that very much. So we'll have you back when we talk about the timber rattlers. Maybe not the milkmen. I don't know if that one's going to really apply. But what are the are there any other positive attributes that we haven't talked about that you want to highlight? And of those positive attributes, are there any that you think would have particular application for making them good at baseball?
Well, consider this.
Okay.
Unlike other bird species, Canada geese moms and dads will very readily and very easily adopt orphaned chicks from other families. And in fact, I've had the honor of working with the local humane society in helping locate appropriate Canada goose families that would be willing to take on orphaned Canada goose chicks. And it's just one of the most remarkable things in the world to be a part of that, and to see these multiple orphaned Canada goose chicks who lost mom and dad. They were rehabbed at the rehab facility. Then they bring them out to the park. And I'm very pleased to say I've successfully assisted in pairing them up with a mom and dad Canada goose that invited them right into their family. And you would never know that they came from a different mom and dad. And the fact that they are just so willing and so open to adopting orphaned Canada goose chicks from other families, I think that's pretty amazing. And I think that's something that quite frankly, as people, we could all learn from, to be more open and caring at a time when, let's face it, there could be a whole lot more of that.
That's for sure. So team players, I think that that alone right there makes them a great candidate for a baseball mascot. They are team players, all about giving it 100%, taking it one day at a time. Good Lord willing, the flock's going to be okay.
There you go, Paul. I love that. Run with that. I like it.
Howard, you not only are a accomplished park naturalist at Ware Nature Center in Milwaukee County Parks, but you are the co-star of the movie, I believe, Major League, and we talked about that in the episode on the Beloit Snappers, that you right alongside Charlie Sheen got to star in the movie Major League. I think we even posted a screen grab of that last time you were on, but I would be remiss in not including that as your part of your baseball fan bona fides.
Wow. Well, Paul, thank you for mentioning that. Yes, I actually was a paid extra in the classic baseball movie Major League, filmed at the old Milwaukee County Stadium in the summer of 1988. It's a really interesting story. I tried out to be a baseball player, and it turns out there were literally 5,000 other guys that tried out for like 20 spots. And but I put in a card to be an extra, and they called me up. And at 18 years old, I was actually paid extra to be a beer vendor. You can actually see me in the movie. It's pretty remarkable. And then I had the pleasure of afterwards, after the shooting was done for the morning, they gave us lunch, and I went below the stadium, and what do you know? There's Charlie Sheen eating lunch, and I got to have lunch with him. So
it's one
my
of my
little
favorite
claim
stories.
to fame.
I absolutely love that story. Howard April, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. Repeat guest Howard April. We'll have you back on again, and it'll be a race to see whether we get to another ball game together first, or we get to have you back on the podcast. Howard, thank you. Hey, where can people find the Ware Nature Center online?
Oh, yeah. Check us out at Friends of Ware, that's plural, friendsofware.org, or go to countyparks.com, and you can find the link to Ware Nature Center in there, which is truly one of an amazing green space in a increasingly urban area. Come on out, check us out. It's a little bit of heaven in Milwaukee.
I have been there. Howard is not exaggerating. And if you are visiting, it'll be in the show notes, but Ware is spelled W-E-H-R. Howard, thank you so much. This has been so much fun to get to chat with you again.
Paul, it's always a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you soon.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It's time for your favorite segment, my favorite segment on the Baseball by Design podcast, Studio Simon Stumpers with Dan Simon of Studio Simon. Dan is wearing a San Diego Padres, the famous or possibly infamous Taco Bell San Diego Padres hat. Dan, good morning. How are you in your hat?
Both fantastic. This I'm fantastic, and this hat is fantastic.
It is a fantastic hat. It's brown, it's
it-
yellow.
Well, anyway, enough about that. Let's
Enough about
talk.
the Padres. We're here to talk about the Beloit Sky Carp, who are, certainly an interesting and varied brand. Lots of stories that they're telling. I'm not even going to try to guess where you might have gone with this Studio assignment stumper. So I'm just going to hand it over to you. Let's get after it.
Well, one of the things that you talk about, Paul, with regard to minor league baseball and its branding, is the story of America through its minor league team identities.
Yeah.
And the stories that they tell. How exactly do you word that?
I think that you got real close there. It's you can tell the story of America by understanding why minor league baseball teams are called what they're called.
Think about what minor league baseball is all about. It's like, they call it the road to the show.
Mm-hmm.
And you have been on the road many times with your baseball palooza trips. In addition to your baseball palooza, there is the as yet to be named Anna Di Tommaso, Ranger Amy, Paul Caputo, Dan Simon baseball road trip. We've bandied about several different names, still haven't arrived on one. And then also you've gone on baseball road trips with your daughters, I'm sure with other people as well.
We just recently wrapped up a North Carolina trip with the Curved Brim Media Gang. We had like 12, 14 people out there going to games in North Carolina, just shortly on the heels of our road trip to South Carolina. So lots of baseball out there for sure.
Right. And you have gone literally all over the United States. I know you have visited all 50 states, not necessarily all for baseball, but you certainly have been to a lot of them. So in your travels, you've seen certainly a lot of ballparks, a lot of baseball games, but I would imagine you've seen other things as well. Have you ever seen things like any of those things, the world's largest ball of twine in Corker City, Kansas? If you haven't seen that, have you seen any of those types of things, those roadside attractions and weird things that people might go to see?
I'll tell you, like the hyperbole sites, the biggest, oldest, the longest. Unless you count, like we went to Multnomah Falls in Oregon on our way to the Hillsboro Hops, coming from Pasco, Washington, Tri-City Dust Devils. I don't think that we have, Dan. Like we certainly, if we had, that I would be playing the song "The Biggest Ball of Twine in Minnesota" by Weird Al Yankovic the whole way.
Yes, I did know that. So for your listeners, if they go to see a game in Beloit, they can see one of the world's largest some things. So our studio assignment stumper today asks, the world's largest what can be found in Beloit, Wisconsin? Is it A, the world's largest Cheeto? Is it B, the world's largest baseball bat? Or C, the world's largest can of chili?
All right. I'm going to say not the world's largest baseball bat, because I wonder if that's in Louisville, outside the Louisville Slugger Museum. They've got that enormous several-story baseball bat modeled after, I believe, Babe Ruth's bat, I think.
I believe that's correct. You would think after living for 22 years in Louisville, I would just know that off the top of my head. But and how many times I've been there. I used to do work for them, so I've not just been there as going on the tour of the bat factory and the museum, but also been there many times for client meetings. And I can say with a large degree of certainty, yeah, it's Babe Ruth, but I don't know. I can't say 100%.
Okay. Continuing on with the sussing here, I'm going to say, when I hear can of chili, I associate that with other parts of the country, possibly even like a Cincinnati, Ohio, because they've got their whole Skyline chili there. And because Cheetos are ostensibly associated in some way with cheese, and Beloit is in Wisconsin, and there's a lot of cheese in Wisconsin, I'm going to say the Cheeto. I'm going to say the baseball bat's in Louisville, the chili is in Cincinnati, and Beloit is home to the world's largest Cheeto.
That would make sense. And it would also make sense because there is a Frito-Lay plant in Beloit. Frito-Lay makes Cheetos. However, at that plant, to the best of my knowledge, they do not make Cheetos. They do make Tostitos and Doritos and maybe other things that end in OS, or TOS actually. But as far as I know, they do not make Cheetos, and the world's largest Cheeto is not located in Beloit. You were correct about the world's largest baseball bat being in Louisville.
Okay.
But what you will find in Beloit is the world's largest can of chili. In addition to there being a Frito-Lay plant in Beloit, there is a Hormel plant in Beloit where they have a storage tank painted like a can of Hormel chilies and beans. Now, what would you use as your silverware to consume a bowl of chili and beans? Would you use a fork or a spoon?
So, as a caveat here, I should state that I was raised in Philadelphia, not known for its chili. The chili that I knew growing up was basically invented by my Irish mother. So eating chili that my Irish mom made in Philadelphia probably does not qualify me to be a spokesperson on chili. And it was delicious. I just don't think most people in the world would actually call it chili. I make a chili now. I put beans in it. I realize that that's controversial for people who actually eat chili and, know what it is. I know that aficionados will tell you that it does not have beans in it. I eat mine with actually neither. I use tortilla chips. But if I had to choose a utensil, probably a spoon.
Okay. Well, if you had said a fork, keeping in mind that in Beloit, you will find the world's largest can of chili. So you would probably need a large fork for that as well.
All right.
Which you can find right in your home state of Colorado, in Creede, Colorado, where you will find the world's largest fork. So
Creede, Colorado, forking great.
As we've said before, and I'm going to say now, and we will say again, the things you learn because of baseball.
The things you learn because of Studio Simon Stumpers. Dan, thank you so much. This has been a fun one. We will talk again next week. You can find Dan Simon, as always, on Instagram at @studio_Simon and online at studiosimon.net. Dan, we'll see you next week.
See you then.